Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church in Eugene. My name is Chris Topaz. I use the pronouns she and her, and I'm this morning's worship associate. On behalf of the worship team, I want to thank you for letting us lead this morning's worship service from the safety of our homes. The church is open for anyone who wants to gather in the building. Thank you, Ian and Stace, for walking to church to open the doors and greet whoever shows up. And warm thoughts to our pianist, Suzanne Gordano, and all others who are home with no power. For the children who are online with us, Ryan and the teachers have a whole separate program for you. Just go to uueugene.org, that's uueugene.org right now, and you'll find the link to the children's program right there on the homepage. I have two announcements before we begin. Today's the last day to sign up for one of our small group connection circles. Look on the homepage of our website for more information. We had been hoping to join the annual MLK walk at Autzen Stadium tomorrow morning, but due to the weather, the NAACP has announced that it will be making the final decision about this event at some point today. So please check the NAACP Facebook page for the most updated information. And now let's enter our worship time by lighting the candle, symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith. Let us hear words of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality tied to a single garment of destiny. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. There are some things in our social system to which all of us ought to be maladjusted. Hatred and bitterness can never cure the disease of fear. Only love can do that. We must evolve for all human conflict a method which rejects revenge, aggression, and retaliation. The foundation of such a method is love. Before it is too late, we must narrow the gaping chasm between our proclamations of peace and our lowly deeds which precipitate and perpetuate war. One day, we must come to see that peace is not merely a distant goal that we seek, but a means by which we arrive at that goal. We must pursue peaceful ends through peaceful means. We shall hew out of a mountain of despair a stone of hope. Now, let's say together the words of our mission, which affirm our shared purpose. Empowered by love, we transform ourselves and serve our world.
Hello, my name is Ryan Doppelmayr. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a 40-something white woman with short brown hair and a gray striped sweater, and I am here to share a story with you. It is an ancient story from Tibet, but it's retold in a collection called Ancient Stories for Modern Times. This particular story is called A Jug and a Rock. Once upon a time, in a land called Tibet, there was a milkman. He was a very happy fellow, and each day he worked hard by getting up early to go around selling his milk, his yogurt milk. He would walk the streets and call out to people, "Dara, Dara for sale, Dara, Dara for sale." He would pour from his large milk jug into their smaller pitchers and collect his payment, going house to house to house. He worked very hard, and by noon he was always ready for a little rest. He would open up his delicious lunch and sit on a rock until it was time to go to work again. Well, one afternoon, he was sitting on a rock and he heard some goats. And he saw a shepherd coming by, and the shepherd yelled out a greeting, "Tashidale!" Hello. Well, the milkman was very friendly, and he called back, "Tashidale!" But his calling out startled a goat that jumped and knocked over the milkman's pitcher full of yogurt. Crash! "My pitcher is broken!" the man cried. "What will I do? I can't afford to replace it with a new one. I need a pitcher to sell my yogurt, to sell my milk. You must buy me a new one." Well, the shepherd, he didn't have money to buy a new pitcher. He felt bad for the milkman, but he didn't think it was his fault that a goat had knocked over his pitcher. "You were careless to leave your jug on a rock. It is not my fault, it is yours. I can't replace your pitcher." They argued back and forth, back and forth. Finally, they decided to take their matter to court. So they both walked to the temple and found a monk. In those times, it was the monk who dispensed justice. They explained their story to the monk, who listened politely. This is a problem. The milkman cannot replace his jug, but without it, he cannot afford to take care of his family. It is not the shepherd's fault that a goat knocked over the pitcher, but if he has to sell his sheep and goats, he will not be able to care for his family either. It is the fault of the goat and the rock. Bring them here for some justice. What? A goat and a rock? Well, they left. The goat came willingly back to the temple. But the big rock, it took 20 men to drag the rock to the temple for justice. The people of the village could not believe that a monk was blaming a goat and a rock and was seeking justice from them. So the villagers surrounded the temple and started to greet each other. "Tashidale, Tashidale, isn't this silly? Isn't this a wild idea? Who would have thought? This is ridiculous." Well, the monk heard the laughing from all of the villagers, and he said, "Wait, are you laughing at our laws? Are you mocking me and our justice? Did you really think I was going to seek out punishment from a goat and a rock? You are all guilty of improper thoughts, and for that I will fine you 1 copper coin." So the monk went around to each villager, collecting a coin from each one. From one villager, 1 coin was not much money at all. But altogether, it became enough to buy a brand new jug. The villagers started to laugh and smile when they saw what the monk was doing. And the milkman and the shepherd thanked the monk for his justice and went on their way. Well, this was pretty silly, right? Do you think the monk was really trying to blame a goat? I don't think so. I think he had a plan because he knew that people coming together and helping a little bit was going to help the situation for everybody. Sometimes when people are trying to get along, things don't go quite so well, right? People fight, people have disagreements. It happens all the time. No one is perfect. And so it is good that we can have ways to come together and solve our problems and try to treat each other with respect and care. Thank you for sharing the story with me today.
Wow, thank you so much, Ryan, for that wonderful story. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jen Youngsun Ryu. I use the pronouns she and her, and I serve this congregation as its settled minister. I'm coming to you today from my home. I am very thankful that I have power and lights and internet, and I know that a lot of our neighbors don't. So I've been away for several weeks visiting family and friends, and I was really looking forward to seeing many of you in person today, but I guess life had other plans. Thank you all for gathering here on Zoom, or if you're in the sanctuary today, welcome. I'm glad to see you all. And I want to thank the worship team for working really hard to pivot and make this happen this morning. So one of the reasons that I was first attracted to Unitarian Universalism in the first place was the emphasis on relationship over adherence to dogma. I really wanted to be with people who would make promises with me about how we will live this faith together. We call these promises covenants. We have a UUCE covenant for our local community, and there is one for the larger UU movement, where we covenant to uphold a set of values or principles. One of those values is to care for and respect the earth and all beings by fostering relationships of mutuality. As Dr. King said, we are indeed caught in an inescapable network of mutuality. This idea is rooted in indigenous philosophy. The practice of right relations affirms our interconnectedness, and it also calls us to be responsible, accountable to ourselves, to each other, to the land, and all of its creatures. And when our actions and our words inevitably harm those relationships, we work to repair the bonds that we have broken. These are high aspirations, just as the vision of beloved community is a high aspiration. And so, how do we take these lofty ideals and put them into practice in daily life when we disagree, when we fight, when we hurt other people's feelings, or when we feel hurt and don't know what to do with that hurt? A few years ago, not long after I started this new position, an anonymous letter came to my office. It mentioned that a church member was behaving improperly, but it wasn't signed. And so there was nothing that I could do about it. It made me wonder about the culture of a community where someone would send me something like that. Secrecy, anonymity, mistrust, a lack of transparency. These are the opposite values to the ones in our covenants. This incident also made me realize that there's no process, there was no place within our church that could even receive this kind of concern. Well, yes, you could go to the board or to the minister, but what if your concern is about the minister or the board? So I invited a few people to think with me about creating a committee on right relations. After a full year of study and reflection, this initial group wrote up a policy for the board to approve and finally for the congregation to vote on last June. The purpose of CORE, CORR, the Committee on Right Relations, is to call us into covenant and to call us up to our highest and best selves. Today, the members of CORE are here to introduce themselves and to begin sharing with you some of the principles that ground their work. One of those principles is about conflict, since in all human relations, conflict is inevitable. We know that conflict can be uncomfortable and stressful and painful and even violent. Dr. King says we must evolve for all human conflict, a method which rejects revenge, aggression, and retaliation. And the foundation of such a method is love. It is through the liberating power of love that conflict can open paths to intense spiritual encounters. We can hold each other in community and in love and transform our conflicts in ways that are just. The spiritual teacher, David Spangler, is one of the early founders of Findhorn on the Isle of Iona in Scotland. He once wrote that some people think they are in community, but they are only in proximity. Some people think that they are in community, but they are only in proximity. True community requires commitment and openness. It is a willingness to extend yourself, to encounter and know the other. My friends, we are building true community here. So come, let us extend ourselves to encounter and know one another. Come, let us worship together.
Hello, my name is Robin Shantz Mulford. I use he, him pronouns, and I am wearing a dark gray sweater and sitting in a brown chair, so I apologize if I'm blending into the video a little too much. I am one of the 5 members of the newly formed Committee on Right Relations. During last June's annual meeting, you voted for us, and we've spent these months getting organized and becoming a team. We did have one person step down, and the board was able to replace her. I'd like to introduce you to the other members of our team. Kim Neese, Jean Marie Moore, Bob Sorentz, and Eileen Waters. As Rev Jen mentioned earlier, CORE is the place to go if you have any concerns about your relationships with the church, if you find yourself harmed by a member of our community, or if you'd like some help in restoring a damaged relationship, you can come to us. You can also come to us if you felt harmed by the church at large. For example, issues of access, inequity, racism, and so forth. We can also receive your concerns about our minister or the board. That's why CORE operates independently of the board and the minister. We are accountable to you, the UUCE members. When you come to us with a concern, the CORE team will decide which 1 or 2 members will handle the request. They will talk with you, and depending on the situation, they may suggest some coaching. Or we can help to facilitate a conversation that helps each party understand one another better. We can also offer a more structured mediation process if that turns out to be the best way forward. All of this information is on the website, so if you want to know more, please spend some time with our policy document or just talk to one of us. We're happy to talk with anyone about our process. The other part of our work is to present workshops and skill building sessions on topics like deep listening, compassionate communications, and transformative justice. We just ask that you be patient with us since this process is new and we will keep improving it with your help and input. Thank you.
I invite you now into a time of prayer or meditation. This is an invitation to extend compassion to yourself and to others. I know that many of us are particularly concerned for our most vulnerable neighbors, those without shelter, especially those who are without power or heat, those who are living alone. And as you are able, please do check in on the people who live around you. Already on UU Share, I've seen people checking in with each other. How are you? How's it going? And if you have electricity and your computers are working, you're able to check back in. But yeah, especially the people who live right around you, if you can just pay special attention. We were talking earlier as a worship team, and Bob was saying that perhaps in the Springfield area, the power outage could go on for a couple of days. And so let's just really be attentive to one another and just really check in and care for the people around us. I think we do that pretty well as a community, actually. And if you can safely get to one of the Egan warming centers tonight, and if you're already trained, please do consider volunteering. They really, really need you tonight. I know I've already heard from a couple of you that you're already signed up and you're going. So yeah, thank you for doing that. And now let's turn to the joys and sorrows of this community. You can use the chat function to share whatever you have been holding in your heart this week or today. I'll read as many as I can. We'll do this for the next couple of minutes. So I see greetings from a whole bunch of people and a lot of gratitude. Thank you for acknowledging that it did take a lot of work and a little bit of stress to pivot. And so I appreciate that you understand that. Oh. So we've got a message from Nicole saying that my dear father lost her father last week and their family is struggling with this loss. Let's keep them in our hearts. Brian is celebrating new beginnings. Oh, wait a minute. New beginnings, I'm sure she's enjoying now. Thanks to Martin Lewis for all the many years of care. More gratitudes for this community and for just being able to be together. For those of us who have power and food, we are thankful and acknowledge that we know that there are many who don't have that. Grateful for comfort and warmth. A lot of people sending hugs and love. It is good to be together. A spirit of life. What a winter wonderland it is out there. It is beautiful and treacherous. It is dangerous. and life-threatening for many. For some of us, these days have brought a sense of calm and peace and tranquility that we really needed. And for others, it has brought danger. All of this is life. All of this is life. It gives us an opportunity for gratitude, and it gives us an opportunity for service. The light of love burns brightly in this community. There's no doubt about that. The Spirit of life, thank you. Thank you. And we pray for all who are in harm's way today. May they be safe. May they find comfort. May they find warmth. Amen.
Good morning. The sermon today is entitled Lessons on Conflict. And my name is Bob Sorentz. I'm a member of the congregation. I sing in the choir, help out in worship, and I'm happy to be here today. For those of you who are unable to see, I am an Asian American, Filipino American male. I go by the pronouns he and him, and I'm very happy to join and participate and lead in this conversation about conflict. And given that tomorrow is the remembrance of Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King Jr.'s life, it's very appropriate that our topic for the sermon today is about conflict, how we live with conflict, how we understand it, what conflict resolution can look like in this spiritual and religious community that we call the Unitarian Universalist Church in Eugene. And one hallmark of Dr. King's rhetoric and writing is a vision of human interaction called the beloved community. We talk about that in this congregation. We talk about creating and nurturing the beloved community. Dr. Sonnet M. Baskow of Northeastern Seminary, a Free Methodist institution, said this about Dr. King and his vision. King spoke often and passionately about cultivating a community that exudes the love of Jesus, where everyone feels seen, cared for, and valued. A community where economic and social justice is the standard. A community where peaceful conflict resolution is not a dream, but a reality and a part of the culture of that community. Now, UUs don't often refer explicitly to Christian theology or love of Jesus, but we certainly affirm the inherent dignity and worth of each person, and justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. The first two principles in our UU tradition. Certainly resolving conflict in peaceful, respectful, and compassionate ways helps us give life to our UU principles and helps us embody the spirit of beloved community. Yet when we think about conflict, it's so easy for us to be overwhelmed with the ways that conflict can elicit the antithesis of beloved community. We see and hear about nations at war, governments depriving citizens their constitutional rights and basic freedoms, corporations pursuing economic interests over the well-being of workers and the health of the planet, political parties feuding over the disparate interests of their constituents, communities of color struggling against institutional racism, in the criminal justice system and housing and education, neighbors and cities burdened with the weight of gun violence. So conflict is ubiquitous, and it weaves its way not only into our public lives, but also our personal lives. Think of the rates of domestic violence, of child abuse and neglect, and the frequency of divorce. The reality and pervasiveness of conflict makes the hopeful vision of beloved community seem like a far-fetched dream. Though Though we know conflict can be utterly destructive, it is also the reality that conflict can lead to positive change, personal growth, reconciliation, and community healing when we seek to understand those with whom we disagree, and in the process, learn more about ourselves. So let's consider in our lessons on conflict a simple example of a conflict between two people. And so I've asked a couple of members of CORE, our Committee on Right Relations, I'm Robin and Jean Marie Moore, to help us demonstrate. So we're going to listen in on a conversation. Let me give you some context for this conversation. So we'll have about 2 minutes for these two to talk with each other about a scenario where they're deciding where to go to dinner tonight. Now, there's an assumption that you both have the ability and desire to go to dinner outside of your homes this evening. And then each person will have 1 minute to share with the other where they recommend going to dinner tonight. While they're sharing, you're not to interrupt the other person, and do not choose the same place or type of cuisine. And particularly try to share how you feel when you go to the restaurant that you're recommending, and don't agree on the restaurant chosen. We'll talk about that later. So Robin and Jean Marie, are you ready? Let's for ease of conversation, let's have Robin go first.
Oh, okay. Well, I really think we should go out and get some pizza, Jean Marie. Pizza's my favorite food, and I could eat it all the time. So let's go get some pizza.
So you want to go get pizza tonight?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm kind of really into my favorite food is pad thai. I love it. I feel nurtured when I eat it, and um I guess I could go for pizza if I had to, but it's not my first choice.
That's fine. I like pad thai. We could probably even find a place that has uh, uh, a Thai flavored pizza.
That's funny. Okay, hold on a second. I'm going to stop you there because I want us to stay with this notion of conflict. So Robin wants to get pizza, and Jean Marie wants to get Thai, and we'll talk a little bit more about that little difference and the simple issue of where to go to dinner. I have a feeling some of you have experienced that before. So let me go back to my sermon text here. All right. So now that we've observed a simple conflict between two people, let's delve into a little bit of a framework for understanding conflict, at least a framework that I think will help us as a congregation and also in our own daily living to sort through the times and occurrences where we experience conflict. So first, I think it's appropriate and part of our experience to know that conflict is a regular and common feature of human interactions. And it's our ability to resolve conflict that has an impact on how well our relationships endure. Our responses to conflict are really quite involved because it can relate to a particular context, whether the conflict occurs in a public setting or in a private setting. It also is impacted by the root cause of the conflict. Perhaps the cause is about some ideology or political view or personal grievance, maybe even abuse or some kind of wrongdoing. And then conflict, our responses to conflict, is also predicated upon cultural or organizational characteristics. Maybe in your culture, I know in some cultures that I've studied, it's not appropriate to deal with conflict in a direct way. It's much more indirect. Also, it might be related to an organization in your place of work. There may be a formal conflict resolution process. Oftentimes, the most challenging conflicts to resolve are those where there are not formal and recognized patterns of conflict resolution. It can also be impacted by the number of people that are involved in a conflict. And another factor that can relate to the complexity of conflict is how much time do you have to resolve that conflict. But I want to talk a little bit about a notion called conflict styles or personal conflict styles. And this is attributed, one version of this conversation is attributed to Swetha Amirson. And we're going to talk about these, and perhaps you can think about those along with me as we go through this. And a couple things I'll say about it beforehand is one, conflict styles can vary even in one individual. There may be times when you use a one style more than others. You might have a preference for using a particular style. And the issue here is not that there is one right style, but it's just a way to help us understand the complexity of the ways that we respond and why we might respond to conflict in a certain way. And I'll just give a quick little example, because I tend to see myself as someone who is comfortable with addressing conflict. But a recent experience at a Costco parking lot in Eugene gave me a pause to consider my human flaws. And essentially, I was waiting to get into a parking spot, and I had my directional on, and waited for this gentleman to put his cart back and put his groceries in and take a few minutes to get himself organized before he backed out. And after he pulled out, someone else just zoomed in, swooped in, and took my spot after I'd been waiting there patiently, very kindly for several minutes. Something snapped. It just really made me angry. So I pulled right behind him and I laid on my horn for about 10 seconds. And then I got out of my car and I said to the guy, I've been waiting for this spot. He said to me, I didn't see you. And I said, well, would you mind backing out? Because I'm going to have this spot. No, you can find another. At that point, I realized, okay, this was not going anywhere. And he said to me, so what are you going to do? Harass me? And I said, no, but that was really rude for you to do that. And he said, well, you were rude for honking your horn. I took a deep breath, found another spot. My wife was waiting inside at the tire shop to find another spot, and I couldn't find one. And in the moment, I thought, I'm going to go back. I'm going to find his car, and I'm going to take my keys, and I'm going to key his car. I'm going to scratch it. I was just that angry. So I rolled up beside him. He was still standing there. I looked him in the eyes, and I did the I see you kind of thing. And he said, well, you word that starts with a B and ends with a CH. And then I slowly drove off and took another deep breath and realized I need to let go of my ego. And just then, a member of our church walked by and said, hi, Bob. And I shared with my wife, and she helped me to back down. So, needless to say, no matter our training, our experience, there are all kinds of ways that we resolve conflict. So let's go to the slides, and we'll talk about this first one. Okay, so our first style that we're going to talk about, and you can read this along with me, is accommodating. And one way I like to think about that is the context of like, what movie do we want to watch? So in this style, and in the case that I just described, you forsake your own needs or desires in exchange for others. You put your concerns of others before your own. And one way to think about it is this might happen when you simply give in or you're persuaded to give in. And this style is appropriate when others care more about the issue than you do, or you just want to keep the peace, or you feel as though you're in the wrong, or you have no choice but to agree with the other person's point of view. All right, Kat, let's go to the next slide. And somehow I lost my voice. This style is described avoiding. And a context you might think about is Thanksgiving with the in-laws. And perhaps these are in-laws that you really don't get along with. But in this style, you simply evade the conflict. You would neither pursue your beliefs or those around involved. Simply, you just continue to postpone or dodge the conflict whenever it comes up. And it can be appropriate to use when the conflict seems trivial or you don't have time. You need to think more about your response, or you feel as though you have no chance of winning, or you're afraid of being met with resistance. Let's do the next slide. So this style is called compromising. And when you compromise, you might think about a context where you're meeting a deadline at work. And here you attempt to find a solution that at least partially satisfies everybody. So everybody gives a little bit, but nobody is completely satisfied. And people might be a little bit unsatisfied or only satisfied to a certain extent. And this style is appropriate when it's more important to reach a solution than to have a great solution, or a deadline is coming, or you had an impasse, or you need a temporary solution for the moment. Next slide, please. So when I think about collaborating, to me, it very much reminds me of what we're trying to do with CORE. And here we're trying to find a solution that would at least partially, oops, I think this slide is incorrect. I think, yes, it's not correct. So disregard what you're seeing on the slide. When I posted this, I did this incorrectly. So in collaboration, really what you're working toward is a situation where everyone is heard and everyone walks away feeling that they're satisfied. It's a win-win solution. And it really is as I said, an approach that we are seeking with CORE to help build relationships, because when you collaborate, really what you're saying, what's most important is that the relationship is preserved. And in order to get there, you really have to hear the interests of each party and make sure that the resolution meets those interests in a deep way. Sorry about the incorrect text on collaborating. Next slide. So this style is about competition. So, and one example, I thought about this when I was serving as a juror for Lane County. And of course, in a civil or criminal trial, there is a decision that's made. And there are two parties that argue, two counsels that argue for their client's position. So in competing, really someone is going to win and someone's going to lose. There are times when this is appropriate, times when you need to stand up for your rights or morals, times to correct a wrong that has been done to a party or a group of people. It's appropriate when there's a need to end a long-term conflict or to prevent a terrible opposing decision from being made. Okay, thanks, Kat. I appreciate it. So when we think about these conflict styles, we often find that we might lean toward one or the other. But as we mentioned before, resolving conflict can be a complicated process. There's another aspect of conflict resolution, though, that's actually quite simple. In fact, we do it every day. And that is conflict, when it's resolved in a peaceful and satisfying manner, invariably begins with listening, with really hearing the other person, not just the content of their conversation, but also the emotional impact of what you're hearing and what they're resolving. So let's go back. Let's see if we can come back to this conversation between Robin and Jean Marie. And so Robin and Jean Marie, here's what we're going to do here to close this out. So let's go back to our scenario, and you'll have a minute to give some feedback to the other on what they're recommending. And you kind of already did that already, but let's see if we can go a little bit deeper and try to share a little bit about what you think they feel when they go into this restaurant. And at the end, we're going to give you a minute to decide where you're going to go. So Robin and Eileen, I'm sorry, Jean Marie, let's pick up this conversation again. Go ahead. Let's start with Jean Marie.
Okay.
Well, Bob Fraley put in the chat, and I just sat here and laughed, that there's actually Thai pizza. I'd never heard of such a thing. I'm limited in my food experience, and I guess I could be in the mood for an adventure and try some.
Well, that sounds great, but I mean, I'm wondering if we can find maybe pizza flavored pad thai now, because if pizza can do all these wonderful things and be anything for everybody, then maybe pad thai can too. It's there's no one recipe for anything, so let's go on an adventure and try to find some various pad thai flavors. I think that'd be great.
Oh,
That's awesome. So what I heard you all doing is, one, definitely hearing each other, hearing the joy that you felt with both of the types of cuisine you enjoyed. And then you did a little bit of compromising as well as collaborating in terms of how you resolve this. And of course, it's a simple exercise, but I think it's very illustrative of what we're trying to say about conflict and how we can go about resolving conflict. Thank you, Robin and Jean Marie. And originally, when we had planned the service, this was going to be something I was going to have all of the congregants do with a neighbor in church, in the sanctuary. But of course, we've adapted it for that context. But again, thank you so much. So as a way to kind of wrap this all up, the goal of the Committee on Right Relations, and in terms of looking at conflict generally, is to help each of us and our congregation nurture and build relationships that endure and thrive. So no matter what the conflict or how complex or the number of people involved or the institution, this vision that we have not only for our congregation but for our world, this vision of a beloved community, helps us to see conflict as something that is normal. It can be expected. And this model, the beloved community, is a model not only for our relationships with each other in the UU, but also a model for our entire world as we strive together to work for equity and justice for ourselves and for each other. May it be so.
And now let's say our closing words together as Chris extinguishes our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. And now, my friends, may the love which overcomes all differences, which heals all wounds, which puts to flight all fears, which reconciles all who are separated, be in us and among us now and always. Go in peace, everyone. Go in love. We'll leave the chat open for as long as you like, so you can hang out if you want. Good to be with you. Thanks, Core. You guys are awesome. Thank you, Bob Sorens.